it can be easy sometimes to critique the Israelites, right? Like, they seem to be a lot. But for us, life is a lot. It can be easy for us to begin feeling overwhelmed, or better yet, to work very hard to convince ourselves that we're not overwhelmed. We've been created to be connected, to live life experienced in community, and to live life in a way that touches other people. And so how I'm doing tends to leak out on my everyday life. Most often with my families, but often with my coworker and people on the freeway. And sometimes the way I respond to a late night email received Friday night that I didn't expect to get. And especially for us here in the Bay Area, we run at a certain pace of life. I don't assume that there's anything commendable about our pace per se. No one has ever said working harder or faster or longer is the key to happiness, nor is it necessarily the key to honoring God, but we do it and operate at that pace to keep up with everything else around us, right? Life is a lot sometimes. And it's in these points where I tend to dig in and cry out, I need a better work-life balance. How many of you have heard the phrase work-life balance? Raise your hand, seriously. If you haven't heard it, I'm baffled, because that's the thing everybody talks about. Somehow this miraculous, magical balance will save us. And sometimes I just feel like a slave to sorting out what that massive teeter-totter is trying to make me do. When life feels like a lot, when it's just too much. What is your go-to move when you're feeling this increasing imbalance, this tension, this frenetic pace of just living day to day? What's your go-to move? We all have them, right? Like, so sometimes people take baths. You might try to find a way to escape. Is it doom scrolling late at night? There's that whole thing where people force themselves to get less sleep because they're trying to own something in their day that they can control. I tend to start to feel trapped. That's a sign to me when I feel like the walls are closing in, and I look for an exit sign quick. Sometimes I'm in meetings and I'm like, where is the exit? How do I get out of this room very quickly so that I can avoid the feelings that it's dragging up in me, the frustrations I have with my coworkers? Sometimes we disconnect from the people around us, the people that we actually want and chose to live our lives with. There's escapism through shopping, through TV. It can happen in reading, some of my fiction books. Some are ways to escape, like whole world-building fantasies in other universes where I can pretend that something is in control. Even vacations sometimes just feel like an escape from the day-to-day, because when I get back, I just pick right back up. The good news is that God knows me. He knows my go-to moves. God knows you. And thankfully, he's not surprised by this, nor is he disappointed in us. God is well acquainted with the ways we get stuck in this world. My own expectations that make me stuck, my expectations of others that make me stuck in work, in relationships, even how technology distracts us is just another take on the same old thing. God is not surprised at the ways that we distract ourselves from the lives that he has given us. We get restless when there's too much. We feel trapped, we feel burdened, and we become slaves to our lives. Life is a lot. So the book of Exodus tells us of a story of a people that is just like us. God's people were slaves in Egypt. Much like us, they had been slaves for a very long time, living for 400 years under somebody else's rule, under a boss whose rules increased in ruthlessness and burden, eventually declaring that they must work harder with less resources. The people were crying out, they need a break, work-life balance. Exodus 5 says, Pharaoh commanded the people, slave masters, and supervisors, don't supply the people with the straw they need to make bricks like you did before. Let them go out and gather the straw for themselves. But still make sure that they produce the same number of bricks as they made before. Don't reduce the number. They are weak and lazy, and that's why they cry, we need a work-life balance. No, they said, let's go and offer sacrifices to our God. Make the men's work so hard that that's all they can do. Sounds familiar? This is what life is like when we don't have rest. We work harder, we do more, we make more bricks with less straw, and I lose myself in the midst of these demands. I am a cog in the universe machine, and there is little of me left to live otherwise. Cole Arthur Riley, an author of Black Liturgies, wrote, rest is not the reward for our liberation, nor something we lay hold of once we are free. It is the path that delivers us there. Rest is actually the path to freedom. And as we've talked about, what keeps you from rest? I imagine every person here has something that they can say, that you can write down on that piece of paper, on the note, on the something, that's what keeps you from rest. Maybe it's homework. Maybe it's your friendships in school. Maybe it's the way your mom and dad are always asking you for more chores. Maybe it's the things that weigh on you heavy at work because you love the people you work with and you know that life is hard for them. Whatever it is, keeping up with the Joneses, working harder, all of these things, what keeps you from rest? The demands of others, money, time, our own limitations that the Lord has given us. Sometimes we just can't sleep. Sometimes our health keeps us, and more often than not, our own compulsions. And in restlessness, we are driven to wander, to resist the truth, and to shout that we need something more. We need a break. Work-life balance. So from a series of miraculous events, God frees the people from Egypt. They cross a river on dry ground, evade warriors coming to take them back into slavery and enter the desert. Certainly now you would think the people know truly they are free. But no, as we saw in Exodus 16, they grow restless and they begin complaining. And man, do they nail it, right? Why didn't you kill us when we were in Egypt? I'd rather have died there. At least we had pots of meat. I mean, come on, you guys. It's horrible. That response, that sense of, God, you rescued us from slavery, but this still is not good enough. They grow restless. They begin complaining because everything they knew, everything we know and live with others is wrapped up in the stories of our other masters. Last week, I had to travel, and when I had to work harder and had conflict with a coworker who wanted me to do something different than I had already planned, and the other one that didn't appreciate the sacrifices I made because circumstances has changed, and I grumbled. So why did Israel forget so quickly all the miracles God just did? For the last 400 years, they'd only known a harsh master. And now wandering into a desert, looking for water and food, it raises the question, is this one different? I work for a Christian organization, right? So you would think I would have it on lock that my master is different. But you get around other human beings and you forget very quickly that God is different than the ways we drive ourselves. So what does God do? He leads them with fire by night, clouds by the day, in a desert, people. He was giving them shade, and he gives them fresh water to drink so they don't die. And in Exodus 16, he talks about the flock of quail that flew down and covered the camp, And in the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. And then when the dew lifted, there was a desert surface where thin flakes, as thin as frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they said, "What is this?" Because they did not understand. Moses said, "This is the bread the Lord had given you to eat." He told them how to collect it. He said, "Don't take more than you need for what? For today. Don't take more than you need for today." And if they did, what happened? It rotted. What was it, Allie? Worms. And it stank. Allie did not like that part of the scripture. It got stinky, it got worms, it was not edible. Each day is new. Each new day holds the potential to remember or forget who has provided this day for us, and how the things that we eat, the air that we breathe, the people that we encounter, who has provided these people for us. Recently, God reminded me that even distractions and interruptions are in his plan. So in the course of the sun up and sundown, God offers to teach us to be dependent on him. He wants us to believe and trust him. And we know this really is hard to do when all that you've known is labor and the air that we breathe is full of demands from the people around us. But God knows this. He wants us to learn that he is not like Pharaoh. Our God is not a harsh master calling us to toil, but the answer isn't in storing up or hoarding for tomorrow. It isn't in taking more than we need. It is to depend on him for each day. And even with this, God wants us to rest. A people who knew no such thing as rest, who toiled every day, all day, with less than the day before. That's who the Israelites were. God told them, "I love you so much, I want you to rest. I am not like the Pharaoh. I am not like your other masters." He said to them, "This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. But you can set aside and keep all the leftovers until the morning." So they set aside the leftovers until morning, and as Moses had commanded, they didn't stink or become infested with worms. And the next day Moses said, "Eat it today, because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you won't find it out in the field." God wanted us to rest so much that he actually told us the way that you experience the world working each day, right? So I don't want you to hoard. If you hoard, that's gonna go bad, it's gonna rot. But on this day, because I love you so much, I'm gonna make sure it doesn't waste, that it doesn't rot, so that you don't actually have to work for it. Sabbath is not something that they achieved. It's not something they earned. It was just a gift to receive from a God who wanted to teach them about who he was and who they are to him. Sabbath is not something they earned for 6 days of toil. It was just a gift, because all of this says something about who our God is. Rest is the path to freedom, because rest orients our identity as a child of God. Utter dependency from sunup to sundown. Rest is the path to freedom. It has the potential to restore and strengthen the truths of who we are to God. Rest is not the reward of our liberation, nor something we have to lay hold of and cling to once we are free. It is the path that delivers us there, because in rest, we find out who God is. The world screams at us that we are slaves, defined by my activity, my looks, defined by others, my likes, how witty I am, my political position, what I do. But God says, you are worthy of love because I made you, and you are mine, and I chose you. Rest reminds me that my worth is not rooted in productivity. God says I'm worthy whether I'm productive or not. Rest reminds me that I don't need to control everything, that God is in control. Rest reminds me that I'm wholly human with limitations. God doesn't expect more of me. Rest grounds me so that I can withstand the tension that is real in our everyday lives for the work that God has actually called us to do. I don't have to escape because I'm already free. Rest is experienced when you are more deeply grounded and connected in who you are and who God is. And there is something about that connectedness that is part of Sabbath. As we practice Sabbath together, we become more aware of our impact on each other. That my choice to receive a gift of Sabbath doesn't just impact me, but it impacts those around me. Because when I decided I wanted to start practicing Sabbath more faithfully, I had to drag Nate into it with me. And have we had to work out and figure out what Sabbath actually looks like for both of us? Yes, we have. And yesterday, when it had been a long time since I had taken Sabbath and a long time since he had taken Sabbath, how did it go? It was sketchy. We went for a walk, and I was like, I can't walk in the neighborhood. This is where I walk when I'm stressed about work. Let's go somewhere else. So we went somewhere else, and I was like, okay, now here's the deal. Only gratitude. We can't say anything about work, because every time we talk about work, he just got a new job. Thank you very much. Every time we talk about work, it makes my mind spin into work, right? We impact each other. And so as we Sabbath together, we have the potential to draw each other more towards God's identity for Curtis and more of my identity rooted in God. How grounded I am in my identity in Christ informs how I see Christ in you. Nate and I have been trying to practice this, as I said, together, and we want to invite the kids into it as much as possible. And we've had a few wins when we played games together or ate dinner together. I start Sabbath on Friday night so I can actually prep the food because I enjoy cooking and it's restful for me. So I prep whatever meal it is they want so that I can sucker them to the table. So I can get them to come to the table and eat together, and then we'll play a game, and then we go to bed, and then I get to wake up in the morning, and then we buy dinner on Saturday so that I don't have to cook dinner. But there's this way that we're trying to be together as a family that's different than we do most nights. So as I said, Nate got a new job, and he's working today, so that's why you're not seeing him here. And I have not been terribly disciplined on my Sabbath because I was taking vacations and traveling, yay, and I had days off. And those practices are wonderful and important, but they do not orient my identity when I return to the day in and day out like Sabbath does. It's only this weekly practice of remembering who I am to God and who God is to me that has really done this work. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not about us as Christians mastering the Sabbath, killing the Sabbath, being the best Sabbather ever. This is about us starting to learn what reminds me that I'm a child of God. What reminds me that the people I look at have Christ in them. The people on the freeway too. What reminds me that God is a good master. And even though God loves my boss at work, that God is so much better. And God sees my boss at work, and he sees me. So I'm going to invite you to experiment with me, okay? let's see what we can learn together. So if you have notes, if you're writing, if you're not writing and you're using your phone, or you aren't doing anything and you want to tell the person next to you what you want to experiment, I'm giving you any option. However, you're going to write it down. What is something you want to experiment with your next Sabbath? Okay? Write it down. Type it out. Tell Siri. Tell the person next to you just something that you want to try. Sometimes I try and paint on my Sabbath, watercolor, whatever. I'm not particularly good at it, but it actually helps me connect with the creatureliness that I know that God sees me as. So I try and be creative. It usually is a good indicator of how grounded I am. If I'm yelling at the paper for not doing what I want it to. Or I do like to cook and make treats. That's a nice thing. I've been pulling weeds a bit on my Sabbath. I know that technically that might not feel like a Sabbath work, but there's something very satisfying for me because so little that I do has any end in the day, that if I can pull a weed and I get the root, come on, if you get the root of a weed, it's so satisfying. Okay, right? So I don't go crazy with it, right? Like I'm not working up a sweat, but there's something satisfying in tending God's creation in those ways for me. We are not going to be masters of our Sabbaths. We're going to let God be the master of our Sabbath. So we call this in InterVarsity, we call this the discipleship cycle. It's nothing new, I'm sure. It's in the Bible. So it means you've heard the word of God today. So now you're going to respond to it. And that's what you've done by writing down. You're going to do it. You're going to actually practice it. You're going to try and find 24 hours where you can try and encounter God in a different way. And then you're going to share with a friend if it worked. Okay, so this is the cycle. You hear the word. Have you heard the word today? Okay. One person heard the word today. Great. No, I'm just teasing. Sorry. You heard the word today. You're going to try to do the word. And then you're going to share with somebody how it went. Now, it is fine for you to go, oh, I heard loud and clear God say, I want you to study this passage, and you're going to encounter me, and then I got busy and I didn't do it. It's totally fine to say that. But the person that you're processing with is going to go, oh, yeah, that's a bummer. What do you want to do differently this week? This is why it's a cycle. Get it? Okay. So in this, we're going to experiment together. We're going to learn how to Sabbath differently as a community. And I am so grateful because you guys, I told Curtis this morning, when I don't Sabbath, I get mean. I'm not nice in my heart and in my mind. People annoy me. Not any of you. Definitely not. But like at work, like people not following the plan that I had that was perfect and didn't work. But why, right? Like all these things become in my grasping control. Because when that person did something different than I had expected, it actually made me have to do more work. And then I felt the burden of that old master shouting at me, work harder, do more. There is no rest for you. And is that from the Lord? It is not from the Lord. So my goal is that as we do this together, we will learn more of who our master is. Of a God who gives rest and is generous despite our propensity to forget who he is. Rest is the path to freedom. Rest is experienced only when you are rooted and grounded in how God has made you and how God loves you deeply. Experiment with rest through Sabbath as an act of resistance and liberation, saying you will not be mastered by the demands of this world, but by a good and generous God who does not demand toil. Sabbath rest is not something to achieve, it is a gift to receive, and Sabbath rest is the path to finding our freedom in Christ. Amen.